Today I'm going to show you how to edit photos in Lightroom. Hello, I'm Noah from Anything Cameras, the channel that focuses on helping you improve your filming and photography. As I said, it's all about Lightroom today. And I have this adorable photo of a puppy here to edit. This was taken by yours truly on my Sony a7R III 85mm f1.4 lens. And yeah, I'm here in Lightroom. I've imported the photo into my library, and so now I can edit. I'm in the Develop tab currently. Now, this photo was actually the edited version. You can see that I've adjusted all the settings here. But if I just go ahead and click Reset, this is what it looked like right when I loaded it into Lightroom. So, Develop tab is where you do all your editing. You can see here that as we scroll down, we have all sorts of options. We have sharpening, noise reduction, HSL, curves, all these different things. So I'm just gonna kind of run through how I edited this photo and explain what I'm doing. So up here on the right hand side of the Develop tab, we have a histogram. A histogram, if you don't know, is a tool that looks at a photo or an image of some sort and looks at its exposure and tells you about that exposure. The middle area here, which you can probably see highlighted, is the midtones. This is where you ideally want things to be exposed. Over here, on the right side, are the highlights. These are the bright areas of the photo. All the way to the right, we have the whites. To the left, we have the shadows, which are the more underexposed areas, and then we have the blacks. If your photo has any clipped information in it, you will see that either in the whites or blacks. Clipped means that the camera, because of the settings, the scenario, or whatever, wasn't able to capture the full detail in the image. And so either the dark, very, very dark areas of the image and the very, very bright areas of an image don't have any detail in them. They're just white or just black. No color, no texture, nothing. They just don't have detail at all. Now in my case, you can see I have a spike in the blacks, but that's not actually because it's clipped. If I raise the shadows, you can see that that moves up out of the blacks and now it's in the shadow area because the dog is black. I don't have anything clipped. So I would take a look at the histogram and I would see what I need to do to make sure the exposure of this photo is right. In this case, I need to increase the exposure a little bit. It's a little bit dark. So now the majority of my image is in the midtone area. And to my eye, this is looking a little bit bright. So I would come down here and I would take down the highlights of the image. This is going to, well, just darken the highlights of the image. The areas in here and a little bit in here, the highlights and the whites. And already this is looking loads better. But I still have some information in the shadows here. And that's okay. There can be information in the highlights and the shadows. But I'm just going to raise those shadows anyway to get some more detail to show off, especially since the dog is darker colored. I want to make sure that I'm exposed mostly for the dog instead of the background. Now, as you can see, I pushed my highlights and my shadows all the way to -60 and +60. If you don't have a super fancy camera like the Sony a7R III, if you push them this far, you may start seeing artifacts, loss of detail, or it may just look strange to you. This is because of something called dynamic range, which is just how much information is in the image. And if part of the image is exposed outside of that dynamic range, that's what causes clipping. But even if it's not clipped, you can't always recover the full detail. So anyway, I've fixed my exposure now, so I'm just gonna kind of get creative with it and edit it to where it looks good to my eye. Now, you don't always want to trust your eye fully because every monitor, camera, whether that's a computer monitor, a phone screen, a camera screen, any type of screen, anything that you view the image on is going to look different from another screen. So unless you have a So unless you specifically have a calibrated monitor for your computer or whatever device you're editing on, then don't just trust your eye, and make sure that the edit overall is a little bit more neutral, because otherwise on different screens it could look just awful. So after I fix the exposure, I generally come down to the calibration tool here. Now this is a little bit more advanced and you may not want to use this yet. However, how it works is it has tint for the shadows, it has hue and saturation for the red primaries, green primaries, and blue primaries. And this allows you to calibrate your image in a kind of creative way to get some effect. In this case, I might add some magenta into those shadows. I might make the reds a little bit more pink, add some saturation in the reds. I would kind of just play around here until it looked like something I liked. I want to add some more blue, like so. I'm going to take away some of the reds and reduce some of this tint, and that's looking pretty good to me. I like how the dog still looks mostly black and there's not too much red in her. I also like how the greens are popping out in the background. After that, as I scroll up, I would take a stop here at the Detail tab, and this allows me to sharpen the image. I would drag this pretty high because of a pro tip I'm going to give you. Masking allows you to sharpen only the edges of your image. Now, as I drag it around, you might not see anything happening, but if I hold down the Alt key, you'll see that as I drag it around, we can see the different areas of the image. The white is what it sharpens, and the black is what it doesn't sharpen. So if I drag this to about here, this means that it's only going to sharpen the areas in white, which are the parts most in focus, because that's where the most harsh lines are. But that's a good thing, because that's where we want it to sharpen. We want to sharpen around the eyes. And then if the ISO were too high, I might add a touch of noise reduction, but ISO 250 is plenty low for my camera. With the A7R III, I would be comfortable shooting at 10,000 without any noise reduction, depending on the overall exposure and the scenario. Anyway, most of my edits are then going to be in this basic tab, is what it's called. And I would start by adjusting the temperature and tint. And I want this to be a little bit warmer. I want it to look like spring, even though this was just after snow melt. And there's really very little green. And then I might add a little bit of green tint. No, actually, I think I would leave tint where it is in this case. Contrast is going to adjust contrast. As you slide it up, you see that the contrast is super high. We slide it down, you see it's really low. I like to add a little bit of contrast usually. So for this image, I might add it to 10. Whites and blacks are going to affect the exposure of those blacks as we see in the histogram, and whites as we see in the histogram. And you can see that if we bring the whites all the way down, the blacks all the way up, first of all, it decreases the overall contrast because we are putting those two areas of the image to a closer exposure to each other. But you can also see that blacks are plus 100, whites are minus 100. I'm just going to hit Control-Z to undo that. Then we have the presence area here. Texture is going to enhance the texture of the image, and you can see if I drag this all the way up, it looks super artificial and sharpened and is pretty nasty overall. I usually don't touch texture. Clarity is going to kind of bring out some of the sharpening and some of the detail overall, and you can see that and how that works if I drag it all the way up. And together, they make me want to vomit. I might add a little bit of clarity sometimes, usually no more than 10. Dehaze is going to try to get rid of any haze in your image if there is some. And it does this by increasing contrast, increasing saturation. It has its tricks. But there's no haze in this image, so I have no reason to use it. Vibrance saturates colors in your image, but it's different from saturation because vibrance starts by saturating the least saturated colors first. Now, usually I like to add some vibrance, maybe around 20 to 30. But in this case, the dog is what is least saturated, and I don't want the dog to look super saturated like so. Of course, it saturated the background too, but I want the dog to look black still, so I'm not going to add too much. Then saturation, I'm going to add about maybe 25. It always depends on the image for me. And now that's looking pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out so far. I don't like how artificially sharp it looks around here by the eye, so I might take down some of the clarity, and I might add some more masking here, like so. That looks a bit better to me. But other than that, that's generally what I do to edit an image. So hopefully this helped you out, explained what some of the settings in Lightroom do and how to navigate it overall. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. And looks at it and looks at its